Well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartree here today with another episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. And today I have the great honor, the great pleasure of talking with Staff Sergeant Naomi Benson, ultra runner who has completed some incredible races, including a 24-hour race while chained to a medicine ball in order to raise awareness of mental health. This lady has been doing some incredible work as well as racing in terms of fundraising as well, shortlisted for the Soldiering On Award. We have a lot to talk about today. As always with my podcast, we will be talking about sports, but we'll be going a little bit deeper into the motivational, inspirational side of things and the mindset that it takes to compete at such a high level as Naomi does. So thank you very much for coming on the show, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. Like I was saying before we started recording just now, I read a little bit about your story and I just thought, wow, it's pure inspiration because obviously your achievements in running are amazing, but what it represents to people in terms of the hope and the inspiration, the positivity, love that. So we've got a lot to talk about now. I don't always start at the beginning with my guests. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But with you, we will. And I read that in terms of ultra running and in terms of athleticism or sports in general, it actually started when you were based in Canada. But correct me if I'm wrong about that, and if I'm right, can you tell us a little bit about where ultra running started for you and what first lit the fire inside you to give that a go, basically?
So basically when I first joined the army, I was pretty terrible at running. I wasn't failing any fitness tests, but I was like right at the back. Um, and one day I was like, I don't like being at the back. So yeah, I started running when I was out in Canada. I was there for 6 months and started running out there, came back. Got posted to, well, I was posted to Germany at the time, so I came back to Germany, went out to Cyprus after that, and did my first half marathon out there. And then yeah, it all kind of the ultra running came from there. So I did a half marathon out there with no training. My friend signed me up to it, and it was the day I was actually leaving Cyprus. And I came third female. I ran without a watch. I had just a little old Casio watch, so I had no idea like how fast I was running, how far I was running, like when the finish was. Um, and I did pretty well, and I came back to the UK, and I started doing half marathons, but couldn't really get any faster. So just started adding the distance on and on and on. And yeah, with ultra running, a lot of it's on trail. So fell in love with the trails, and that was the end of the story for me.
Wow. Well, the end or the beginning, depending on how you look
Yeah.
at it. An amazing story. Thank you for giving us just the background, the context of that. You've been in some cool places as well. I was in Cyprus in
Yeah.
March as well. Beautiful, beautiful country. So that's the start of running. Now, just one other thing about the sort of early years of your start. Before you started running in Canada and before you did that half marathon, that first half marathon, did you have any other sporting sort of interest in like in any other sports before that, or did it literally just start with running and start at that point?
I used to run in school. I used to run 800 meters, and I would show up to the track events borrowing my stepmom's trainers because I didn't have my own proper trainers for running, so I would borrow her shoes. And I used to play netball and a little bit of rugby when I was a kid. But yeah, the running kind of kicked off once I joined the military.
Absolutely, yeah, it makes sense. And like I say, it just gives people the background because what's cool about that is obviously people see where you're at now, but seeing the sort of humble beginnings, seeing how you built it up one step at a time, as we have to do with anything, I think is inspiring for people in itself from that to where you are today. Now, with that in mind, did you ever consider at that time, maybe during that first half marathon or whatnot, that you would ever take this as far as you have now, or at the time were you just enjoying running sort of for the pleasure of it, if you get what I mean with that one.
Yeah, no, I absolutely could not imagine what I've done since then. Uh, yeah, when I did that first half marathon, and it was slightly longer than a half marathon because it's gym to gym, in Akrotiri Episcopi, and I was actually injured at the time. I was running with a friend, and I kind of ran ahead because he couldn't keep up, and I was like, oh, when my knee goes, then like I'll slow down, you'll catch up, and we'll see each other again. And we didn't. And it was then that I was like, oh, okay, I might be okay at this running thing, considering I was so bad only a few years before. So yeah, I had no idea then when I was doing half marathons that I would end up running like 200 miles like I did last year. So yeah, very surprised myself.
Absolutely. And yeah, so you should be. You've exceeded your own expectations. I love that. As I said before, it shows people who are chasing their dreams, chasing their goals, that these things do take a little bit of time, but with the hard work and the belief, obviously, you can get there. So that's part of the reason for illustrating that. So again, with the timeline here, just correct me if I'm ever out with the timeline. That's always the trickiest thing. But in terms of obviously progressing from half marathons. What was your next step following on from that point, please?
So I did a marathon. I did the Milton Keynes Marathon as my first one, but I did it with a friend, and it was her first marathon too. She actually signed up to it and asked if I would do it with her. And I had a half marathon in Sunderland the day before. So I said yes anyway, and then ran the half marathon in Sunderland that she came to watch. And then we drove down to Milton Keynes and we both ran the marathon the next day. So yeah, I kind of went from half marathon straight to marathon, and I only did two marathons and then went straight to ultra.
Wow. Although I can see the some of the seeds of the what was to come being planted there in terms of obviously doing them back to back and everything. So that's very cool. So only two marathons. Okay, so jumping into it with the ultras. Now, one of the things before we jump straight into the ultras is obviously your training as well, because one of the things I like to do with these talks is go a little bit behind the scenes, talk about the
Hmm.
things that people don't see from the outside looking in. Now, obviously, other runners will know this, but for people who sort of watch the races and things, it's a little different. So, how were you developing your training point by point? From obviously half marathons to marathons to ultras, because I know you said with the very first half marathon, there wasn't really much training there. So I'm just curious how that sort of evolved from one point to another, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll be honest, my training as a proper training has not really evolved. I've never followed a proper training plan. I tried to do it once and it made me miserable because being told what day you have to run and how far you have to run that day and how many hills you need to include doesn't really fit around my lifestyle. So my training is just I see what distances I'm doing and I'll just try and run as much as I can leading up to it based around whatever I've got going on at the time. So sometimes that works really well. Sometimes it doesn't work at all. I recently did UTS 50 and I was barely running at all before it. But I did okay. And then last year, when I did the 200 miler, I was only really running 3 days a week because I was doing pre deployment training with the army for the rest of the week and I was too busy. So, yeah, I haven't ever followed a proper training program. It's just try and do what I can and try and get in the gym as well, just to try and do some strength and conditioning and stay injury free.
Absolutely. Well, Naomi, that's a good lesson there, good life lesson, because actually, I can see that as being a major positive in terms of being in tune with your own body, being in tune with your own mind, your own self in general, basically. And I get where you're coming from. I mean, funnily enough, I have spoken to quite a few runners on this show who've been through that process where they started off with something very sort of rigid, very set in place. I have to do this, I have to do this. And over time, they sort of adapted things of saying, right, okay, this bit works for me, but maybe this bit doesn't work so well, and sort of shuffle it around to make it their own. And again, not just for running, but for life. I think that concept of being in touch with yourself is is very important. So it's a good little topic to touch on there. So let's talk about the ultras then. I mean, the first ultra, not really a specific question about it, but just can you just describe it in your own words, what it was like, the highs, the lows, anything you'd like to share, really?
It was absolutely brilliant. It was probably that I can remember. It was the first trail race that I'd done, and it started in Rosilly in the Gower. Started and finished there, and I think it was 37 miles around that kind of distance. But yeah, it was incredible. It was what made me fall in love with the trails. So yeah, it was really good.
Good experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I mean, obviously being out in nature and everything is a beautiful thing. I mean, and don't get me wrong, Naomi, I run, but obviously nowhere near the level you're running to. But still, there's nothing like being out in nature. I mean, it's totally a much better experience, my personal opinion, than being on the road. Although obviously some people love the road, so hey, no judgment. But I get where you're coming from with the trail side of things. So something that people don't see again is when you completed that, basically, how did you feel? What went through your mind? I mean, in that first thing, just talking about some of the things inside yourself of obviously achieving a goal like that for the first time, what went through your mind at the end and everything?
I'm trying to think back. It was a while ago now. I think I was just like happy that I'd managed to complete it. I gave myself a time, I think of around 7 hours. But I was working off like road running times and guesstimation. And I think I came in maybe either just under or just over. I know it was like roughly around the time that I had wanted to, but it was completely made up. And yeah, I spent a lot of time just taking like pictures of myself in these beautiful locations and just thinking how lucky I was that I got to run around and explore and not feel too bad about it. But then I was exhausted afterwards and went for dinner and then went to bed.
Absolutely, yeah. Funny enough, I was going to say about that in terms of what happened after and the recovery process, but it's good to touch on that a little bit. I mean, does the physical recovery take a long time after a race? Obviously, that's 37 miles, but I mean, we can touch on some of the longer ones. How long does it take you to sort of feel right normal again, basically, after a race?
I would say for me, the 24 hours after a race, I'm usually like I feel drained. Um, Mainly because I've not been eating properly and things like that during the race and keeping hydrated as much as possible. I always kind of let that slip. But yeah, the 24 hours afterwards, I'm always very kind to myself and just go for a walk and take it super easy. But then I'd say like the next day, I just start feeling good again. So I'm ready to do little runs or go back to the gym. Um, yeah, I was running, I think after my 200 mile there, I was running 3 days later, just like small miles, but um yeah, I recover quite quickly, but I do pay attention to like rest and nutrition for a day or so.
Yeah, that's cool. That is quite something because again, it's something people don't always see, so it's sort of an interesting little snippet there. Now, obviously, we'll come to some of the headline making races, shall we say, the ones that I've seen being all over everything in the papers and whatnot shortly. Before we do touch on that, when it comes to the fundraising side of things, again, where did that start for you in terms of mental health awareness, in terms of the concept, broadly speaking, of obviously using the running, not just to smash your own goals, but then when it sort of started having an impact on other people as it's doing now, if you get what I mean. And obviously we will touch on the whole medicine ball thing being changed to you and all that. But just to get the sort of beginning of that idea of using running to help people, where did that first come from?
I think so yeah, without going into the medicine ball thing just yet, I I know a lot of people who suffer with mental health issues, and I've had some very small issues myself. Running's always helped me, and it's always kind of helped clear my head. It's kind of the only time that if there's any other stress going on in my life or anything like that, it's the only time that I know that I can't do anything else physically other than what I'm doing right in that moment. So for me, it's just a way to kind of go and clear my head and make myself feel better. So yeah, then I just thought, well, this is something that I can do and this is something that helps me. So maybe I can use that to bring attention to it for other people and try and raise awareness.
Absolutely. And it's amazing work you are doing with that because not to go off topic here, but the whole mental health thing, it is a very isolating thing for a lot of people in the sense that, people thinking they're the only ones going through it, not being sure how to reach out, not understanding that they can get through it at all because obviously it seems permanent at the time. And again, like you, I mean, luckily I've never had any major things, but I have had a bout of depression before, which, you lapse into it and just can't shake it no matter how much I talk to myself and say, well, look, I got this to be grateful for and that to be grateful for. And luckily it passed. But and in my extended family as well, there's a lot of mental health, not with my parents, but with other family members, and you see the effect it has. And so showing people that they can get through that get very sort of dear to me personally as well. So amazing work. So let's go through it with a few of the ultras then. Now, like I say, I've seen some of the ones you've been doing that have been making the headlines, but I actually don't know in terms of ultras, how many have you done all in all? If how many is the actual number?
I don't actually know. I've lost count.
Really?
Uh,
I thought you
yeah,
might have. Yeah.
not necessarily because I've done so many, but I think because I don't often race, I don't often do events, as in run them myself. I I do a lot of like ultras in like ultra distances when I'm training for something else. But I don't, in terms of events, I have no idea how many I've actually done. I I never really counted, to be honest. I was always just like, okay, cool, what's next? Okay, what's next?
Yeah. I thought that might be the case. Again, a few people have told me that because, when you're doing something for the love, you don't always want to sort
Mm.
of crunch the numbers in that way. I can understand that. Um, but the 200-mile one is the longest one you've done, isn't it? That's the longest race.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it
Okay.
is. Yeah.
Wow, we'll talk about that in a minute because I'm itching to talk to you about that. But I also want to touch on the medicine ball thing and the 24-hour race as well that I've seen making headlines quite a bit because obviously it never ceases to amaze me the level of endurance to do something for 24 hours or sometimes longer with ultras. Can you talk to us about that race in terms of your memories a little bit of the race, obviously, but especially in terms of how you mentally keep going for that long, basically.
So I felt really lucky that day. I'd done it on a Wednesday, which to most people doesn't mean very much, but to the military that is sports afternoon. So a lot of people have take the afternoon off, are allowed the afternoon off to go in sports. So I deliberately done it on a Wednesday, hoping that I may. I planned to do it in Aldershot, but the track was busy. So I did it around a track, which was an added kind of extra factor to it. And I ended up doing it in Tidworth, which is another kind of garrison town, just because the one in Aldershot where I was based at the time was busy. So I did it in Tidworth, and actually, it was a lot easier than I was expecting, but purely based on the amount of support that I got during the event. So every single hour of the event, I had somebody come down and run with me or walk with me, and have a chat. And then my boyfriend came down to do 20 miles. He brought my dog down. So we did 20 miles during the night, around the track in the rain with the dog. And yeah, so mentally, it actually wasn't as difficult as I was expecting it to be, but it was purely based on the amount of support that I had um, for that event. So yeah, it was an amazing event. It was really good.
Absolutely, it's an incredible achievement. I mean, like I said before, I'm always blown away with the length of time and the discipline when I hear about these ultras. And you mentioned about the support there, so that was obviously a massive help for you in terms of what's going through your mind when you are racing for that long. When I've spoken about this before, some people say, they have mantras or they have certain little things that they do, where some people say they sort of daydream while they're running, some people say they concentrate a lot. So it does seem to vary a little bit. But in terms of your personal process, when you're running for that amount of time, what sort of things are going through your mind? Are you just sort of taking it, say, I don't know, a mile at a time or something, or are you thinking about other things? I'm just curious to get an insight into what's going through your head, basically.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I do a lot of maths during, so thinking like, oh, okay, cool, I did that last mile in this amount of time. So if I do the next few miles in that, then that means I finish at this time. But I'm not great at maths, so I mean, I'm not terrible, but I'm not amazing. So that takes up a little bit of time, and then, by the time I've worked out all of the numbers, then it's almost time to work them out again because I've done another mile, so I need to adjust the timings. So I do that quite a lot, which seems a bit weird, but yeah, I do that. And I guess I just kind of enjoy the scenery around me. A lot of the time I'm not running with someone else. And a lot of the time, especially all my long runs I do on my own with the dog. So I spend a lot of time. I don't listen to music when I'm out on the trails. So I just try and enjoy what's around me. Yeah, and I guess I must just daydream. I'm also trying to make sure the dog isn't chasing any sheep or people or anything like that. So that's a good distraction when I'm not racing, when I'm just training.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can imagine it is. And again, behind the scenes, like I keep saying, it's one thing to follow the race, but what's going through your mind is a fascinating insight. And on the subject of insights, obviously the medicine ball idea that we touched on earlier, and we touched on the inspiration for that is quite unique. I mean, on the show, I've had quite a few ultra runners, some marathon runners, and all different things, but the medicine ball concept it seems to be quite unique in a way. And where did the idea of that come from? What actually sparked that for you in the beginning?
So it's two friends of mine that have created the challenge. And so the medicine ball is a physical representation of the invisible burden of mental health. So the actual challenge is to be handcuffed to the medicine ball for a week. And years ago, I think 2017 maybe or 19, was the first time I did the medicine ball challenge. And I thought on a weekend people were taking it on park run and things like that. And I thought, well, I don't do park runs, so what do I do that I can take it on? And I asked permission to take it on a 50-mile run around Snowdonia. And I wasn't allowed to be handcuffed to it for safety reasons, but I didn't want to just put it in my bag because the whole point is that it's on show and it gets people talking and it strikes conversation and kind of stops the taboo about mental health because it's like out in the open. And so I put it in an old like ball net, like you would have in school, and hung it on the outside of my bag. So everyone was like, "What's that?" Like not just people in the race, but like strangers who, especially around Snowdonia, is quite busy. So yeah, I just thought this would be a great way to get more people talking. So yeah, that's kind of where it came from.
Wow. I love that. Absolutely love it. I mean, as you say, having a physical representation, it's very cool with mental health because, as you say, I think this the stigma and all that has come a long way. It's still got a way to go, obviously. But what's beautiful about that is it really shows people, as you say, the physical illustration, putting it because a lot of times it's like if someone broke their arm or something, nobody would say to them, "Well, look, can't you just not be injured? What's wrong with you?" But then if somebody has obviously some sort of mental issue, people can say, "Well, look, can't you just snap out of it?" And obviously then putting that in a physical sort of way, it's absolutely cool. That's not a question, I'm just saying it's absolutely awesome. So that was that one. Okay, that was one of the things I really wanted to touch on with you. Obviously, I've been looking forward to talking to you about the 200-mile race as
Yeah.
well, and I know you've mentioned that a couple of times, and absolutely incredible because as you well know, a lot of ultras are like 100 miles, 160 or something like that, but 200, that's in a league of its own as well. So basically, let's start with the beginning of what inspired you to do that. And I know I've asked that a few times, but it's cool because you keep pushing past the boundaries and past the limits, or in that way, showing that the limits are not there really. So when it came to you to do 200 miles specifically, what was the initial idea with that?
I guess because, like I said earlier, I'm not a fast runner. And I'd got my half marathon time down as fast as I could, and I'd done marathons, but hadn't really like they're still meant to be a fast run, really, even though they're obviously like double the distance of a half. Like they're still quite a fast run. So for me, I was like, this is not my distance. So then got into ultras, and then once I did start running ultras, I was like, okay, I need to just try and go as like if I can't get faster, then I need to get further. So that was where it came from. It was like I've done this. I did 100 miler, and actually 3 days later I did an 88 miler, which was a a Royal Marines race. It was meant to be done as a relay, but I jumped on a team with a week's notice that was doing the thing full out. So I did my first 100 miler and then 88 miles like 3 days later. So I was like, okay, I reckon I could do a 200 miler. Um, so that's where it came from. I actually DNF'd my first attempt at 200 miles though. Um, but that's kind of where it came from, is just pushing the distance because I couldn't run faster.
Wow, I love that. I mean, fair play to you. Jumping in the deep end, you've done 100 miles, and it's like, well, okay, let's just add 100 more miles onto it as you do. That's cool. Now, you mentioned there though about DNF in the first 200-mile thing. Now, I don't dwell on anything negative in the interviews at all, but the reason I want to ask you about this, obviously bouncing back from um, defeat or whatever you want to call it, is something that happens to all of us in life at one point or another. And I think in a funny type of way, it sort of feeds back into the mental health thing as well. So basically, more than what happened, I'm interested to just find out a little bit about how you went again after that, if that makes sense, like the lessons you took from not finishing it and then decided, okay, I'm going to try this again and sort of bounce back, if you get what I mean with this one, you know?
Yeah. I don't really dwell on things that don't work out. Obviously I finished it. I DNF'd my first attempt, and um, went home and sat on the couch for a day because I was injured. I couldn't really do anything anyway. I couldn't really walk. So sat on the couch for, well, it was a couple of days, feeling a little bit sorry for myself. And because the race was still ongoing, I was seeing how my friends were doing and things. So I felt kind of a little bit sad. Um, and then I was like, okay, cool. So when's the next one that I can do? Like, I didn't manage it this time. So when is the next time I can try this? So I didn't, yeah, I just was like, this is something I want to try and do. So I will do it. I will try until I do succeed. And then obviously, luckily, the second attempt went much better.
Absolutely. And like I say, it's just a good life lesson because we've been talking a lot about the successes and the amazing things you've done, but obviously there are times in anyone's life where things don't go according to plan. So touching on that is valuable. So the one that did go the way you planned and hoped, let's talk about it a little bit in your own words, and we'll have to break the race down. And I'm trying my best to cover these from people who know more about ultras and everything, but also some people who are not really experts in the field. You know, but saying that, I don't claim to be an expert in the field myself. I mean, I've interviewed a fair few of them, but you still learn and you still grow into it. So in terms of the race itself, 200 miles, the experience. What stays with you most about that race now when you take a moment to look back on it?
Um, I just, I just really enjoyed it. I just like really enjoyed seeing what I was capable of. I enjoyed the fact that I surprised myself, that the things that I thought would happen and would go wrong didn't happen. I gave myself kind of three different timelines of how I wanted to complete it. One being just to complete it within the time allocated, one being like a time that I would be happy with, and then the third one being that I would finish on my birthday. Which, so the race started on the Saturday, on the Wednesday, my birthday was on the Saturday. So my like best case scenario would be, oh, it'd be really cool to finish on my birthday, even though I didn't think that that was actually going to be possible. Um, but that's what happened. So I think I just surprised myself by how well it actually went, because I went into it not knowing what would happen, especially after coming off my first one. Um, and yeah, it was just the fact that I surprised myself by how well it went, and also how I finished with nothing broken. I expected to be limping around or covered in blisters, or I don't know, like something much more tragic than the reality. So, and the reality was I actually finished with no blisters, and I was fine. Um, so yeah, just the surprising myself at how what I could actually do. Um, that's kind of what sticks with me.
I bet it does because again, it shows that a lot of these limits that people put on themselves are not really well, they don't exist basically, do they? I mean, as you've established, you can push past that, you can push past that, and how far can you go? What was the terrain actually like for that race as well? I think that bears mentioning with this one.
It was hilly. It was 31,000 feet. So it was from Chepstow to, yeah, well, back to Rosilly. So it actually finished in Rosilly, which is almost exactly where my first ultra started. So that was kind of bittersweet as well. But yeah, hilly trail, small bit of road. But yeah, like mainly trails, a lot of hills, a lot of being out in the middle of nowhere. It's a great route. It's a really great route.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it must be beautiful being out there that far from everything, and that's definitely a bonus. And yeah, I mean, I'd read about the elevation. That definitely gives a different sort of perspective on it. And also, just for anybody who doesn't know, with a race of that magnitude, how long were you running for, all in all?
So it took me 77 hours, 51 minutes. Yeah. And 3.5 hours of that was sleeping though.
Okay, only 3 hours.
Yeah,
Wow,
well, yeah, 3.5. Yeah.
3.5. Yeah, wow. That's as I say. I mean, the whole sort of no sleep or minimal sleep thing is just absolutely it's amazing. But I have spoken to a few people now with this. I think I've had 32 hours, 50 something, 51, 52, something like that. And these type of distances that either with no sleep or very little, and it's just like my days, is the willpower it takes. To hone in on that a little bit, I know you said it was easier than what you thought and you didn't have blisters, and I was sort of half expecting to hear, my toenails were falling off, my feet was swollen, but fair enough, fair play to you, none of that. But obviously, when you are running that distance, there's bound to be a little bit of a pain barrier in terms of the fatigue and in terms of like the some of these types of things. When that does come up, specifically, because we focused on the side of it where you're enjoying the trails, you're enjoying the landscape and this type of thing. But when you do have like a wave of like, oh man, this hurts, oh man, I'm tired, or whatever it is for you, what is your technique for sort of just pushing past that point when it comes up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I talked to myself, and I talked, this is going to sound really strange, but I talked to the part of my body that is hurting. So, like if my feet are hurting, I'm like, no, like you don't get to hurt. I'm like, you're okay. Like this is not a proper injury. This is just you being tired, and you need to stop because we need to keep going. And then I'll like pick the next bit of body that's hurting, and I'm like, no, you don't get to hurt. Which it sounds really strange now that I'm saying it out loud, but in my head, I don't say it out loud. In my head, I'm just talking to this body part, and I'm like, no, not now. We haven't got time for that. We've got to finish this. Um, so yeah, and I did have cramp in my feet pretty much all the way through the race. And at one point, my friend was like, "You do know that that cramp's not gonna, it's not gonna go away no matter what, like how fast or how slow you're running. So if you want to pick up the pace, like feel free to, because your feet are gonna, it's still gonna be there no matter how fast you're going. So you can run faster." And I was like, "Yeah, you've got a point." Um, so yeah, just talking to your body, it's really stupid, isn't it? It sounds really strange.
No, it makes a lot of sense actually, because there is a mind over matter concept. And remember, obviously, the pain is just your body trying to tell you what's going on. So there's ways. I do remember reading somewhere that Ioannis Kouros, I think I'm butchering his name, but one of the great old school ultramarathon runners, he did say about that, where he said, "Where's the effect? I tell my body and it listens," or something like that. And I have heard this type of thing being made reference to. So it actually makes a lot of sense in that type of way. I mean, it probably feels strange, but it actually makes a lot of logical sense listening to it. So,
Yeah.
that's cool. I
I mean,
mean,
it feels normal to me because I
yeah.
do it, but when I say it out loud, I'm like, oh, I sound so so weird.
No, no, I totally get where you're coming from. And again, it's a great life lesson, because whatever people are doing in their life, even outside of running now, if it's another sport or if people are going for anything, a business goal or an exam or whatever, there's going to be pain on the way towards that. So the ways that you can mentally master that and sort of shift it around, I think is absolutely amazing. After 200 miles, I know you touched on this a little bit, but again, the recovery or any celebration that you did afterwards or whatever? And what happened sort of immediately or after the race, or maybe even a couple of days after, or however much you want to share, just in terms of the aftermath, basically, you know?
Um, Not a lot. I mean, it was obviously it was my birthday on the Saturday. My friend met me at the end and gave me some balloons and some pick and mix, which was lovely. And then I went home. I slept on the sofa, well, had a shower, had a bath, slept on the sofa for 30 minutes, and then just hung out with my boyfriend. I was back in work on the Monday. And then it was the Wednesday following that. So I also do route marking for Trail Events Company, and we had another event coming up. So I went and route marched down in, I think it was the Southwest Coast Path. Um, yeah, like that, either that week or the week after. So it was kind of just back to normal jogging. Just yeah, go back and then go and do this. So yeah, afterwards I was just route marking for some races as my kind of way to celebrate, was just going back out on the trails.
Wow. Well, that shows your passion for it, if anything does, it's absolutely very, very cool. It does sound like a nice way to celebrate. I can understand that. I love nature as well. I totally get where you're coming from. So we've talked about that. I'm missing something. Oh, with the Soldiering On award situation as well, we need to touch on that. Can you just share with us a little bit about what that means to you, basically, and a lot of people will have obviously read about this because it's been in the different papers. For anyone who hasn't, perhaps just give a little bit of context about how it came to be, but mainly about what it means to you personally to be recognized in that way.
Yeah, it was really amazing actually to be nominated for the award. Despite the fact that I didn't win, the other people in the category, and actually people previously who've been in the category, have done some really amazing things. So to be nominated for the award, which yeah, was basically the Sporting Excellence Award, I think it was called, was yeah, like it was amazing just to be kind of recognized that they thought that what I'd done, which to me didn't feel like I'd done a lot. It was nice that they thought that it was. So yeah, just because I'd raised money for combat stress and the Army Benevolent Fund when I was doing that challenge, they nominated me, put me forward for the award. Yeah, which was really nice.
Yes, it is. It's nice for you to get the recognition you deserve in that way. I mean, I know obviously you're very humble about what you've done, and you're very sort of down to earth and a little bit sort of low key about it, which is cool. But at the same time, getting that little bit of recognition again, from my personal opinion, not just for your achievements personally, but again, what you represent by doing what you do in terms of all the mental health and showing people what's possible. I think it's absolutely great. So we'll wrap this up shortly because we've talked about some good things, and you know what people's attention spans are like. And I have to be off at sort of 5:30 anyway. But with the last couple of things, a big one is obviously your future plans. I mean, you've achieved all this, but as I've already got the gist of when you do one thing, you know, you want to do something else, you want to push it a bit further,
Yeah.
and you're not always satisfied with these things in that way. So, what is coming up next for you in terms of racing or in terms of anything else that you'd like to share, really?
So this year I don't think I've got any races planned at the minute this year. I've got a place in the Arc of Attrition in January, the 100 miler. I've also got a place in the Tarawera 100 miler, which is out in New Zealand next year. And I'm running another one in Texas in January, 2 weeks before the Arc of Attrition. So yeah, I'll just be. I'm not sure about the rest of this year. I like to sign up for things last minute, so it's a surprise that I've got things planned that far ahead. Two of them were deferred from this year. So yeah, I don't normally plan that far ahead. So currently nothing for the rest of the year, but we'll see.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure there'll be some amazing achievements yet to come as well, because I really get that vibe, you know, Naomi, that you want to keep pushing the barriers, you keep seeing how far you can go. So the last thing before we wrap this up, last thing, I often close out with anybody that people would like to thank. So in your case, people who have helped you along the way in your journey, because we've been focused on yourself individually, but no one's an island, as they say. So there's bound to
Yeah.
be people who've chipped in and helped in various ways. It could be a very long list, but if there's a few people you'd like to touch on, could you just give them a mention, please? Anyone you'd like to thank?
Yes, I will try and keep it short. My boyfriend, who always supports me and encourages all these crazy things, make sure there's a bath ran at the end of my runs. Trail Events Company, who actually crewed me for my 200 miler. And also, yeah, they try and help in any way. And all my friends that support me and look after my dog so that I can go running. Um, yeah, everyone, I've got a very good support system. I'm very lucky.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it's good to give them a mention because obviously they help you and you all sort of know each other. But again, from the outside looking in, some of these people who do fantastic work to help athletes, they are sort of behind the scenes. So it's good to give them a mention. Any sponsors or any other people who've helped in the sort of business side of things, or is that not relevant? That's cool. Just
I
checking.
I do not have sponsors, no.
Just checking, because lately I've had a couple of people where we've actually closed this out and they've come back to me and said, "Oh, I've forgotten to thank my sponsors." And I said, "Right, okay, just send me a video off your phone and I'll cut it in." So at least we don't have to do that today. So no worries. Well, Naomi, thank you very much for your time, first and foremost, taking time out of everything you've got going on to do this, and thank you for being an open book as well in terms of sharing not only the races, but you know, going a little bit deeper and sharing a little bit about your life and your mindset and some of those sorts of things. Very grateful for that, and I've enjoyed it a lot, and I hope you have as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for chatting with me.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.